everyone. Welcome back to the CCO Follow podcast. We're really excited. Travis and I are here with our friend Sharon Lohman, and today we're going to be talking. We're going to be diving deeper into what it means to live in this upside down kingdom. Specifically, we're going to be talking about serving and what that looks like. And we see the world's kingdom, it focuses on this idea that it's promoting self. What can we do to make others serve us? But the upside down kingdom, or Christ's kingdom, looks at this idea completely backwards, upside down, and it says, what can we do? How can we gain authority to serve God? And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm really excited to have you on as a guest. Thank you for coming. And
thank you,
Travis. So let's just get us started here. What does it mean? You have this idea of great in the kingdom, servant of all. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, for those of you who have been longtime Calvary Olympia people, you're probably familiar with Gail Irwin. I don't know if you guys have heard him before, but he used to come here and speak very frequently. And one of the things he would do is he'd bring these books that he's written, but he also bring these bumper stickers. And one of the bumper stickers had the word others on it. And this was a really big mantra that he would promote. And it actually comes from a story from the Salvation Army with General William Booth, where during one of their yearly appreciation times for everyone who served in the Salvation Army, he wanted to send a telegram just of encouragement to everyone who served across the nation and stuff. And they were very short on funds, as you'd imagine they probably often are.
I bet.
And as the story goes, he kept having to pare down what he was saying. And eventually he's like, how much can we even send? Like, we don't have enough money. And like, we can send one word. And so he sent one word as a word of encouragement for the entire Salvation Army leadership and volunteers, and the word was others. And so it's just that idea that to be a servant really does just encapsulate that idea that it's others focused, that you're not thinking about what this gains you. You're not thinking about what this makes you look like. You're not thinking about how people might treat you. Your intention, your direction, your focus is on others.
Yep.
And it's very just, kind of encapsulates what servanthood is.
Serving isn't about me. It's about you.
Yeah.
Yep.
What I can do to serve you.
Yep.
Yeah.
This idea that we're to serve God and serve others. It's so different than what the world says, because it really is. The world is about self.
Yeah.
And it looks so much different than how can I garner and gain, other people serving me to no. I'm going to sacrifice and give to you. I'm going to start serving you. What are some examples, Travis, that actually, Sharon, what are some examples in your life that you can see some of this contradiction between God's kingdom, the upside down kingdom, and the world's kingdom in your life?
I can really tell you that I worked for 40 years for a publishing newspaper.
Oh, wow. And
while I enjoyed what I did and worked for wonderful people, it was all about the world and the world's, I guess, what they want to hear. And it was completely different than, I say, Sunday morning, but we eventually had we had 800 and some employees, and there were probably 40 of us that were strong believers, and people would come to us from the world to have us pray for them when there was a problem, because they knew that we did something different than they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
Well, and even, thinking about your workplace, stuff like that, I know a lot of workplaces, they'll go out and volunteer somewhere, and they're like, oh yeah, we care about others. When really usually it's a publicity stunt, it's about, well, how does this make you feel? And so even the world's, counterfeit idea of serving is still self-focused.
It is.
Yes.
It's serving because it makes you feel good. It's serving because you might get attention. It's serving because you're trying to weigh out the scales at the end of time that, you're good outweigh your bad.
That's such a good point, Travis.
Really the Christian is one of the few, is the only one who can really serve with an other's true focus, because our debt's already paid. We have nothing to gain. By serving, we have nothing. It's just, we're doing it because we already have everything. We already have Christ.
Yeah. And I want to talk about kind of the heart behind that a little bit too. But just kind of before I kind of bring that up, what where can this happen? I know it kind of in our notes we have, church, home, work, and society. Travis, can you kind of explain a little bit of like maybe just what it's like in the church and how that is different than the world?
Different than serving in the world, or different than how the world serves? Yeah. I mean, obviously in the church, there's many ways that we can serve. And I think sometimes one of the greatest, problems we can run into is we think about titles first. Oftentimes when people think serving in the church, they think, oh yeah, serve on the welcoming team, serve on the worship team, serve with the kids ministry, serve. And like you have a title associated with this serving where, 99% of the serving that happens on a Sunday ought to be just people ministering to one another. And I mean, just taking like the gifts of the Spirit in Romans or 1 Corinthians and how the body is meant to minister to one another. Where's those just exhortations before or after service? Where's those words of encouragement? Where's prayer? Where's hospitality? Like
that's
where's all these things
of serving that many people just don't even think about.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where even if people are doing it, they don't recognize that like I was part of something.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of people don't even realize that they're serving, and yet they may be serving more importantly than somebody else on a committee that has a title.
That's very good. So it looks different, right? But it doesn't have to necessarily, just because you're a Christian and you go to church and you're you're doing the right thing. It's some of that, what you were saying, thinking about how people in the world serve and it benefits them. That can happen to us too. Mm-hmm. That can happen if you're
definitely.
I don't know if you have any examples just in your life, but I'll just give one from myself. Is when I first started serving in the church, I was a high school student, and I was kind of asked. Someone brought me along and said, "Hey, would you like to just serve in sound and figure run our youth group and all that stuff?" I said, "Sure." And it was my first experience with it. And so I had no expectation. I had no, my motivation behind it wasn't anything that I could even think about. It was just, I'll just do this. And as time went on, I went to college and, I thought to myself, I kind of play some music. I'll try to be on the worship team. I'll play guitar. And
we'd really like you to do I think by the way.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see after you hear the story.
You just admitted publicly that you play instruments.
You'll see after the story.
So
write that down.
I thought, wow, I'd like to, be on the worship team, and that might be cool. And so I started practicing. I started going to the practices, and thank goodness God just knows me, right? I was like, I could do this. I'm kind of admiring people on stage. And so my motivation of serving is now shifting, and it's becoming selfish. And so I'm at this practice, and I'm wondering, okay, when can I, be on stage and do this, and God just loves me so much. The lead guitarist of the worship band of my church came up to me and was like, hey, like, we really appreciate you coming out, but you're not there yet, and maybe you'd like to do sound. And so I got kind of pulled back into it, and it was like immediately I just knew. I was like, okay, this is why I'm supposed to do sound and not this, because my motivation's different. I'm behind the scenes, and it was a humbling experience, but it was one of those aspects. I guess the reason why I bring it up is because for me, it's so easy for our motivations to teeter and become selfish, and and that's why it's so hard, even at church especially. But I can't even imagine just at work and in society when everything is just blasting. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you.
Well, and I don't want to give the impression. When I said earlier about, we are Christians are the only ones who can have like pure motives in a sense, it doesn't mean that we're perfect.
Yep.
And so there's definitely, I think, this side of heaven, there's nothing that we were possibly going to do that is utterly perfectly right motives, everything. Because if nothing else, there's always in the back of your mind, I'm gonna feel really good when I do this.
Yeah.
But even our own vernacular, we emphasize scriptures that say like, it's more blessed to give than receive. Don't you want to be blessed? And like, don't you want that good feeling? And like, sometimes we even encourage that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible this side of heaven to remove all selfish motives and be completely other-centered. But it doesn't mean that we we don't have the capacity to grow in that, where the world has no capacity to grow in that. There's nothing they could possibly do that that has no selfish root in it, because they have nothing else to hold on to. They have nothing else that would pull them out of that. Where the Christian is kind of the reverse. It's like we have all the reason we pull out of that, and God is just dealing with those extra pieces with everything we do.
Yeah,
I have a good example with being on the prayer team, and especially this last year, I've had some surgeries, and I can't get into the clothes that I used to because of my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I've had to just wear the same things over and over again. And for a woman, that's not fun. Yeah. And somebody my age, because we like to dress. But I found myself thinking, wow, I've got to be on the prayer team Sunday. What am I going to wear? And
all eyes are closed. What am I going to?
Yeah, exactly. And that's about it.
We all do the same thing, don't we?
And I caught myself thinking, wow, Sharon, this is not about you. This is all about you sharing with somebody else. And I mean, the Lord really kind of slapped me upside the face and brought me down a peg when I realized that it doesn't make any difference. You know, I can take a shower and smell good and go up there and pray, because that's what the whole thing is about. It's not about me. It's about sharing with somebody else.
Yeah. Okay, so we've brought up, let's just talk about it. We've brought this up a couple times where, you know, I gave my story, and I had kind of a humbling experience. Same with you. You kind of had a humbling experience.
Yes.
Why? And you were saying, you know, as a Christian, we have an opportunity to grow in that. Why? What's the reason? Why? How can we grow in that, and why do we grow in that?
Well, I mean, the reason why is that that's how God is. And we have the example in Philippians 2 where Jesus is like, where Paul speaks of Jesus saying that he did not count equality to be equal with God, that he humbled himself, that he, you know, became a servant of all. Jesus himself said that of himself multiple times, that is who God is. And ultimately, we're called to be holy as God is holy, to be set apart like him, to be like him. And so ultimately, that's the why. I mean, we were created to be like God, and that's one of his characteristics that we are created to, reflect, is a selflessness and an other-centeredness. And then the how, I mean, it's by the grace of God.
Yep.
No
It's, just as, in Galatians 3, it talks about how, you began in the spirit. Why are you now trying to work it out in the flesh?
Yep.
And, we were saved
That's
by
good.
grace. We're saved to this new reality that our debt is paid. We're filled with his spirit. We're given his grace. Now let's walk in it. And, it's, the fruit of the spirit, joy, peace, patience, kindness, all these really good things. The gifts of the spirit, which includes literally serving, they're the Spirit's gifts. They're the Spirit's fruits. And so it's simply it's part of the whole sanctification process of Christians becoming more like Christ by his grace, his Spirit, his power.
For me, it goes back to the phrase that we've all heard. God isn't asking for my ability. He's asking for my availability.
Yeah.
And I just need to be available. And he's going to give me whatever I need to minister to whatever situation he's put me in.
Yeah. There's even that verse in the Old Testament that says that God's eyes search to and fro for those who would be, available to him, faithful to him, responsive to him.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about this, and I don't even think we really were planning to go this way here, but I'm thinking about it, and it's dawning on me as well right now, just as we serve, it is a spiritual endeavor. Just, we talked about studying the Bible, last month, and we talked about how it's a spiritual endeavor, but I guess every, the part of the Christian life, it's just all a spiritual endeavor, but serving is like that too. It's not about what we can provide and give. It's really what you're saying is our availability and our desire to serve. And I just think about, and I'll ask kind of examples from you guys, but when I first started doing sound, I had no idea how anything worked. I didn't even know sound waves were a thing, I just...
and even now, I mean, who knows?
Yeah. So how, it's just wonderful to see where I was just available in that, and God just did the rest. And I'm here working at Calvary Chapel of Olympia because I just said yes, and now it's God's providing the rest. What are some examples in your life?
Wow. I think for me, right, the most current thing would be landing here at Calvary Chapel. my husband and I both lost our spouses late in life and met each other at a grief share gathering. And then 5 years later, Pastor Chuck Lynn married us.
Wow.
And we ended up here at Calvary Chapel after going to several different churches, just seeing what was out there. But God knew right where we needed to be. And he knew both of us coming from completely different persuasions and different ideas about God in our lives. He brought us here to get us into the Word. And that's really helped me. I'm doing something that I've done for years and years and years, sharing with other women as far as counseling, biblical counseling. But for me, it's a whole new experience now, and it's a deeper experience because it's in the Word. It's not just issue focused, even though issues are important, but it has to come back to Jesus. And I am enjoying serving that way. And even I was sharing earlier, there are seasons to sharing. You gentlemen are both young, and you've got a lot to grow into and seasons to go through. And I've been through a lot of them. And you get to a certain point in your 70s and you think, wow, am I going on the shelf, or what's God doing here? And never. There are always seasons in God's kingdom, and especially in the upside down kingdom, because he gives us the ability to do what he wants us to do for the season of life that we're in. And health issues may dictate what you can do and what you can't do. And I was starting to think, oh, wow, I'm never going to be able to do this again at church, or, and I think, Sharon, you've done that. You've walked through that season. You're in a different season now, and you've got to just let God point you in the direction that he wants you, and he's going to give you the ability to do what he wants you to do.
Yeah. That's good. It'd be really comfortable if we just did the same thing, right?
Yes.
Very comfortable.
Absolutely.
But serving just as we serve God, we're not called to comfort,
He stretches us in any season of life.
And that's what serving is. That's what's so great about serving. I know I'm not going to be leading the media tech team my whole life. I mean, maybe I will, but I'm under no illusion that I probably won't. And it's exciting for me now. I think before, if you told me that, I would have said, well, that sucks. But it's exciting for me now because I'm excited to know what else God has for me to do. And I'll just do it. I learned, I'm sorry I'm taking so much time, but I learned just being here how to build houses and decks and carpet and redoing carpet. I mean, all
furnaces.
of these, furnaces, exactly, and all these different things I would have never imagined that I'd get to learn. But I love doing them, and it's just that's the joy I think of serving, and it's the joy that you don't expect.
We learn from serving.
Yeah, totally.
We totally learn.
Yeah.
When I think being available, it does a couple things also. Not only does it obviously allow God to do whatever he wants to do, but it also allows you to not be so fixated on the exact thing you were doing.
Right.
But it gives you the freedom to enjoy different things.
Yeah.
Because,
That's
if
good.
you were so focused and unavailable to God to allow you to serve in those different areas, yes, you would have enjoyed that one, but you would have missed out on the joy of all these others.
Yeah.
And all the ways you can learn and grow, experience even new people, and just all that kind of stuff. I did love how you mentioned just the stages of life, and how important it is to recognize the different stages mean different areas of serving. I know John Piper is one of your favorite guys ever. I think I've said that 3 times on the podcast already. But he has this wonderful series about don't waste your life. And how many people they get into their elderly years and they just step back, and they're just like,
I'm
just let someone
retired.
else do it.
There is no retirement in God's
Retirement's
kingdom.
for fun, and
Well, it's much like the last episode to go out with Steve Gideon of how Ambassadors for Christ is not something clock on, clock off.
Yep.
Same thing. This is just one more aspect. Upside down kingdom, there is no clock off, clock on.
No.
It's
our
your life.
life.
It's who you
It's
are.
our life.
Yeah.
And and that includes every stage of your life. It's heartbreaking when people get so attached to a specific thing of serving, because if they can never do that again, well, I guess God can never use them again. I guess they can never serve again. The youth group, they're so mean. We used to do Q&As, and one of the Q&A questions they asked when I was the youth pastor was, would you rather lose an arm or a leg? And I was like,
Wow.
that's
tough.
I'm like, if I lose my arm, I can never play guitar again. I could never, like, I wouldn't be able to lead worship. You know, one of the things I love doing. If I lose my leg, I'm gonna be able to run with my kids anymore. Like, and it was just like, but it was one of those times where it's like to think about, you know, well, is playing guitar really all there is? Or, you know what I mean? Is that the only way I can serve? The only way God can use me is that, you know, and I think, the seasons of life, God may even take away a good thing you're serving in just so you don't become so rigid. So you don't become, just to help keep you available, just so that you can enjoy the process and enjoy him instead of being so hyper focused on just this thing. Because I mean, God doesn't need us to serve.
No.
Like that. It's not. He doesn't need our money. He doesn't need our time. Like God can do much better without us.
No kidding.
You know, it's just so it's beautiful when people are willing to recognize their seasons. You know, I'll never forget there was this woman, Dee Fernand, who when I was in youth group, she was a youth leader, but she couldn't come to any camps, mission trips like that. She was elderly, and it was hard for her even to get into the youth room and stuff like that. But she'd pray. And that was one of her biggest ministries is just praying for youth group. And she was a youth leader, went to almost no events, would sometimes come to service, but basically like as the youth leader, she didn't have a small group. As the youth leader, she prayed and she would sometimes go to service.
As I've gotten older, my friends are getting older too. And I have some fantastic, solid prayer warriors, and they can't go and do, but that you know that they've got your back because they are sucking the carpet praying for you. And even today, before I knew we were going to be doing this, I texted several of them and I said, hey, just be praying this afternoon for 3 of us at church. We're going to do a podcast. And
this is going to be the best podcast episode yet. All our friends are praying.
Thanks for praying.
Well, seriously, you've got some really good, solid prayer warriors. And these are gals that could teach before and could go to camp with the kids and stuff, but they can't now. They're almost homebound. But boy, are they prayer warriors.
Which I think prayer really is not to like categorize and uplift one area of serving over another, but I think prayer is one of the ones that exemplifies the idea of servanthood so much more than any other thing, because you know, for instance, like those people praying, we don't, I don't know their names.
No.
They obviously, she's not going to tell us. Clearly now, but you know, it's not like they get any credit for anything that happens right now. No one's being like, oh, it's because they did this. Like there's so many things that only happen because of prayer, but they're rarely tied to the end result.
No one says,
no one
it's because
sees
you
it.
prayed.
No one sees it. No one knows about it. You know, out of all the kind of things that you can have selfish motives for, it's one of the few, because you're unrecognized, all this stuff. It might make you feel better, like, and you might see the benefit of that, and maybe that could be some, you know, whatever. But it's one of the most selfless things we can do, as far as serving.
It truly is, and like I mentioned earlier too, I'm talking to myself. I have to be careful going up front to pray, because then you're visible. And I don't go up there for people to see me. And I have to remind myself that when I think, oh, gee, is my hair combed? And, you know, what am I wearing? It's God, who are you going to bring to me today? And what is their need? And help me meet that need, because I without you, I can't do this.
I'm very thankful for the times, you know, I was sharing with the worship team a few weeks back about that exact thing of like, hey, we need to guard our hearts, because most of them, they're on stage, and that's how most people know them. And, you know, I'm very thankful for the journey God put me on, because, you know, there were times where I was leading for hundreds of adults, and there's times where I was leading for a handful of kids. And just because of the people he put me in my life along the journey, the journey he had me go on, just his grace and his spirit, I'm at a place where honestly, I don't care who it is. I just enjoy doing that. I enjoy the teaching and the leading worship, and whether it's for 5 kids or 500 adults, it doesn't matter. I just don't even care. But that's only because of his graciousness in bringing me to that place where I could do that. And I know it's scary. You know, you have to always be guarding your heart to make sure, you know, why am I doing this? Especially when it's public facing. That could be a really dangerous thing.
Totally. And I think about just all of the different kinds of serving, and I look at prayer, and I kind of compare that to teaching, and it just makes me realize how difficult teaching really is, because there's so much like all the things you said about prayer, it's like flipped with teaching. Like you're being seen, people are listening to you, And it's like, how do you guard your heart with that? And that's actually a question I want to ask you, Travis, because you teach often, and you're our worship leader. You're on stage. How do you how does someone guard their heart when they're so out in the open?
Well, I think for one, you just have to keep asking God to keep you humble and and not, there's that saying that humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So not keeping you humble. Like
That's
sometimes
good.
people are like, oh, God kept me humble because I really stumbled over my words today. And it's like, no, you just got your eyes more on yourself.
Yeah.
So that's not what I mean is like, oh, God, keep me humble because, I screwed up and watch myself later or something. It's different, it's not the same thing as, keeping attention on yourself, but
It strikes at the root, the motivation.
Yeah. And that psalm where he's, search me, O God, and know my heart. Our heart is deceitfully wicked. Jeremiah warns us, like we can't trust it. And there's this wonderful book by David Platt called Dangerous Calling. And that was very eye-opening for me, very humbling, but the word I'm looking for is just very just made me almost on edge of like, this is something that can never go wrong. Because if it goes wrong, it's very wrong.
Yeah.
So I don't think I have a good answer for you.
No, I think that was great. I think that was great. And I think we're talking a lot of what we're talking about has been kind of church related in the church. Let's remember back to, before, at least for me, before I was working in a church and for your life, when you were working in the world, when the world is so, and I said this before, but it's so self-focused, and the motivations, TV and our phones, social media, it's all telling us that we need to build more of ourselves up. Mm-hmm. How can we serve God and serve the kingdom in the world? And how do we navigate that? And we talked a little bit about that at being ambassadors in a previous podcast. But how can we actually serve others well in the world? What does that look like?
Can I?
Yeah.
Of course. For working in media for 40 years, and also walking with the Lord for 40 years. And you're at work Monday through Friday, and I had a job where I was on. Well, beeper. You boys probably don't even know what a beeper is. I had a beeper.
I'm assuming it's a pager, right? Please say that was a pager.
Yeah,
it was like
a
pre-pager.
beeper.
Okay.
24/7. So I could get a call at 2 a.m. and have to go in to work.
What a joy.
Yeah. And so, and a lot of people, they knew they had to do that, but they would grumble and complain. Mm-hmm. And I knew that either that morning or before I'd gone to bed, laid my head on the pillow, I'd given the Lord that day and that night, if that's what something came to. And I found that I could approach things with a different attitude. Wow. Yeah. And I would have people, and trust me, this is not me patting myself on the back. I'd have people say, there's something different, and I'll kind of, well, am I weird or what? But then it would often lead to a conversation because they're a person that would maybe come to me for prayer. Didn't go to church, didn't know the Lord at all. So they saw something different in me working in the world.
Yeah.
And I can say that about the people that I worked with that were part of our group, that even to this day we keep in touch, and I remember how valuable they were for me to be able to go to in a hard place, because you were always kind of fighting to get to the top, and I rose through the ranks and ended up in management, and it was completely different than when I started taking classified ads over a phone. Sure. God directs. He really does. And one thing, Ron and I have adopted that family verse of Proverbs 16:8 that our heart directs us, or man's heart directs or points him in the way he's supposed to go, but God directs his path. Yeah. And I have found out that that's true. And what you gentleman said about guarding your heart, that is so true. there are people in the world, they think that, follow your heart. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Because my Bible tells me my heart is just wicked.
Yeah.
And so it is upside down.
It is.
In the world, but because it's upside down, things come up where it gave me opportunities to share with people why I felt differently.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this with young adults last night in our small group time after studying Galatians 5, and a couple of people in my group talked about how, in their workplaces, just how, like you were saying, just being so different. And it's not like they do necessarily better work. Like clearly they're trying hard, but they just have a different attitude about it. And and we have, obviously God's Spirit inside of us, which literally, changes why we do things, how we do things. It's just, we're literally different people. We're made alive in Christ, and that's a new creation. Especially if you're ever, if you are at the same job when you get saved, they certainly notice a difference. But even coming into a job already saved, you're simply different. I know one of the biggest witnesses I had, especially when I worked at Starbucks, where it's, it's a fast-paced environment. People are always, getting upset at each other and stepping each other's toes. I was known as the person who would always apologize. And, that's a very unique thing about Christianity is that we ought to be, so quick to apologize because our value is not found in perfection.
Right. Yeah.
And, we ought to be always, repenting of sin. So this just is a normal, apologizing is a normal act of a Christian. Martin Luther described it as a Christian's life as daily repentance, and so.
It's letting people at work see the Jesus in you, even if they don't realize that's what it is.
Yeah.
They know that there's something different about you.
Yeah. And it gives opportunity, in either on the job conversations or off the job conversations to just be
Absolutely.
what is different.
Yeah. When I worked at, I'm lucky enough to say that I worked at Wally's Sandwich Bar. And if you are from Olympia, Wally's Sandwich Bar. Unfortunately, it's no longer in business.
They introduced me to shredded carrots on my sandwich, and I've never been the same.
So I was lucky enough. I got to work there one summer, and it was probably my first. Wasn't my first job, but it was my first job where I was really communicating with my coworkers really deeply, because we're all making sandwiches together, and it's a tight group. When you're on shift, there's only like 4 or 5 other people, and it's really small. And surprisingly, when it's not the lunch hours, not a lot of people show up, so you have a lot of downtime. You're
surprisingly, should have seen that one coming.
And so I got to know these people. I only worked there for 3.5 months.
Wow. But you had a sandwich named after you. In 3.5 months' time,
that's a different story. That's a different story.
We
your
need to air that
sandwich, gourmet clout had already amazed them.
Yeah. Well, different story. But anyways, I got to know these people that I was working with so much more intimately than I would have ever imagined. And it kind of, for me, it was like, I'm just living my life. They know, I'm a Christian and all these things. But I realized at that job when I would say like, I'm a Christian, it would click in my coworkers' minds like, that's why, you don't complain that much. And that must be why. And I'd have people, I had a coworker, his name was Ben, and we'd play video games together. We got connected, and he was always just so perplexed at why I wasn't getting so frustrated or angry, and I would try to encourage them, and I wasn't even doing this because it wasn't like, I'm gonna do this and make it known.
Yeah.
It was just simply the Spirit at work in my heart, and it was a big. I hope that, and I trust God that it affected my coworkers in a way, because they were so, downtown Olympia, very, very different than being Christian. And, but it was such a wonderful experience, but it makes me think about all of our experiences. It makes me think about, where the idea that, we're not called, as we work in the world, we're not called to work really hard for ourselves. But we are called to work hard, but to work like you're doing it for Christ, because you are. Like in when I heard your story, it dawned on me. It was like you were having that good attitude and all these different things. The Lord was working in your heart, but really is because you aren't working for yourself.
Right.
You were working for the Lord and for others,
Right,
and you were serving
exactly.
others in that. And same with you, Travis. And so it's one of those things where it gets where the Lord says it's not burdensome, like my
yoke
commandments.
is not,
yeah.
My yoke is not heavy. My commandments aren't burdensome. It's so true when we have the Spirit, because we're not working for anybody else. I'm not doing anything. Even when I'm working here, I'm not doing anything for John or for the elders.
Right.
I'm doing it all for Christ, and I'm really putting my effort in. You can do that anywhere.
Yeah. A 60-second segue has nothing to do with serving, but you're calling me think of it about how, when they asked you what was different, and all those examples, when they ask how you're different, we have to be careful to make sure we give the right answer.
Yeah.
That we say we're different because of Jesus. It is very tempting, and I've heard many people say this. I'm sure I've said it too, where it's like, oh, that's how I was raised. Oh, it's my personality. Oh, I just try. I do my best.
Yeah.
And they're such pithy answers. They're so they're not accurate, to be honest.
They aren't answers you're evading.
It's a fear tactic.
It's
fearful.
and it's a response that's so natural because you don't want to create an awkward situation.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a whole conversation.
I don't
want
to
to
bring up Jesus because everybody associates him with crazies.
Yeah. And you may even to a certain extent feel like, well, it was my upbringing. Well, okay, then say, well, by God's grace, I was brought up this way, so I didn't have to struggle with living this other way. Because honestly, it's like, what do you have that God didn't give you?
Exactly.
As the Bible tells us, it's one of the important things. We need to give glory where glory's due.
Yep. And it's all His.
Yeah, and that's very true. I see that in now transitioning from not working to being home, and yet where is my marketplace? The grocery store, Costco,
literally the
Albertsons.
marketplace.
It really is. And now it's even transitioned differently when we're buying things online. We're not in the stores like we used to. But then you have a problem with something, and you may have to call somebody and talk to somebody. And the difference in my attitude in being more loving and acceptive rather than complaining, and I've had people remark, "Wow, thanks. That was a breath of fresh air today. You have no idea the people I've talked to."
Yeah.
So it makes a difference.
Well, it's
It really
amazing
does.
when you go into those places. You go into Costco, you go into a restaurant, you go into Walmart, and you pray beforehand, asking that God will give you opportunities to serve someone, love
Open the
someone.
door.
It's crazy how the situations are just different. We used to, when we lived in Florida, we'd go on nightly walks down there was like a downtown strip. There was one main road that we just walk on. And we just pray like, oh God, like send someone our way that we can help, send someone our way that we can minister to, you know what I mean? And so we'd get all these homeless people, and it became a problem. Like we would nightly have different homeless people. It wasn't like the same people. Like somehow word got out, I guess. Like, hey, they'll be walking downtown every night, and we'd buy coffee for people and pray for them, buy sandwich for people, pray for them. We would never give money because high drug.
Right.
And it became a problem that we one night we were like, God, we can't financially help one more person. We're just going on a walk. And we didn't meet anyone. We didn't see a single person.
Wow.
And we left that for a couple weeks. And then we were like, okay, we feel like we have a little bit of money that we can like give again. So we prayed again. And someone that night asked for coffee.
Wow.
And like, if you go with the intention of being like, okay, God, I want to serve.
Right.
You may not have a job that you go to. You may not have a consistent this or that you go to. But God has people who need him. And he's the one who's setting up all these, these interactions to begin with. Just if you feel like you don't have an opportunity, let's pray.
That's
Ask
right.
for an opportunity.
That's why I think it's so important for all of us to pray in the morning. I mean, I'm not saying you have to have your devotions there. It doesn't. Everybody's different.
Morning time only.
Yeah, I know. Well, I agree with
kidding.
you, but
I'm not a morning person.
If we don't do that, start your day that way before your feet hit the floor. Lord, this is your day, not mine. And I've had to remind myself of that more this last couple of years with these different surgeries and not feeling like I used to and being kind of owly and complaining. And then I have to rein it all in and get back to what Jesus wants. And it isn't about my comfort. It's about what he wants me to accomplish during the day. And he'll send me whoever, whether it's a text message, a phone call, whatever. That's serving.
And he really does give us that day. We're not guaranteed a day.
No.
I want to kind of bring, because we're talking about this, and I want to bring up something that at least I'm thinking about right now as we kind of, before we close out, I think for me personally, because what I'm hearing from both of you is that serving isn't just, oh yeah, I serve at my church and that's what I do. No, serving is a lifestyle. You're doing it every day, and every day you're giving it to God. You're serving God in that aspect just by giving it to Him, but through your work and all these other things, it's all serving. I find in myself, the most difficult place to serve well is in my home. It's with my wife.
Sorry, Molly.
And it's that way, and I don't know if you guys maybe feel the same way, but when I go through my day and I finally get home, it's like I can kind of relax. I can kind of throw it all off, and I can decompress is the term. But sometimes when I do that, it becomes selfish. It's like I did all this stuff today. I worked really hard. I just want to relax. I just want to do this thing. And so then it's like I neglect serving my wife, and it's so wrong. And I just find it's the most difficult area in my life. And so what I have to pray is when I'm on my way home, I pray in my car and I just pray, Lord, give me energy, give me, because I'm not done yet. My day's not done yet. Right. And I want to serve well. And so I don't know if you guys have the same area where it's hard for you to serve, but what are some areas that are difficult for you to serve that you need to pray over?
Can I butt in and be very, very transparent?
Sure.
Remarrying and in older years, you're really set in your ways, both of you, and you really hope and pray that this is going to mesh somehow. But Ron and I've had our challenges, but he walked away from the Lord for a number of years and then radically came back. And people, his family, friends that I have met now have said, wow, you got the good Ron Lohman. And I said, well, he's the only one I know. And I know it's the Jesus in my husband. And I'm the one that's been walking with the Lord for years and leading Bible studies and, counseling with people and doing this and doing that. And I come home, like you said, and I have been battling since I've had some physical challenges. I've been battling my temper. And every so once in a while, some words fly that should not pass my mouth. And Ron has completely conquered that, and he gives all the honor and glory to God for keeping his mouth clean. And I feel really guilty because here is this guy that the Lord has really worked on, and he just is being so good about this. And then here comes Miss, I've been in church for a million years, person saying something that she shouldn't when she's losing her temper. And so that's something that I've been really dealing with, and it's a point of prayer. And I don't ever want to hear him say, wow, you go out and serve people at church or whatever, and then you come home and you're different. I don't want to be different. I want to be real, but I want to be what Jesus wants me to be. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
No,
but
I appreciate that.
It's
just
truth.
Something. It's just, and we all have stuff like that. I mean, I know Travis is perfect, but we all we all have stuff like that. But it
At least
really
it's not
is
going to be on the podcast.
I just think we all of us collectively, those listening, and let's pray for the Spirit to work and move in our hearts so that we can serve well, because it's so simple but so difficult. And it doesn't have to be a burden if we just let the Lord work in our lives.
I like what you said. It's not a burden, but it's really important.
Yeah.
Well, and it can be hard. And, it's kind of like how simple and easy aren't the same thing. It can be hard and not be a burden. Like, it doesn't mean that it's not difficult. I think sometimes people, they're like, well, this shouldn't be hard. It's like, no, not being a burden and being hard are two different things. But I think one of the things we can easily overdo is overdo one area to where we just exhaust ourselves so much where we can't even help in another area. And so
that's a good point.
That's balancing too, where you put all of your, because everything is for Christ. Like we shouldn't compartmentalize,
Yeah.
and in ways that that diminish all the other areas of life that Christ is still Lord over.
Yep.
Especially in a society where we overschedule, we overbook, we overwork, we overdo everything.
Yeah.
You can't do 110. Literally, the math doesn't work.
Yeah.
You only have 100, and so figuring out how to serve well means sometimes cutting back a little bit in one area so that you can do well.
Yeah, giving up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And not giving up, that kind of goes back to the availability thing. Like it's,
Right.
If you are overdoing in one area, you're not available for God in another.
Yep.
And being careful to not do that. And I think sometimes we can, go the other direction and we become lazy, and not, but, that's something each of us will always have to wrestle with and balance with.
Right.
But, realizing that we are human, and with that doesn't just come in imperfections, but it comes limit.
Yep.
Limit of time, limit of energy, limit of resources, limit of talent, limit of everything. You can only give yourself so many directions, and part of being a servant is following the one we're serving.
Yep.
He
That's
cares
it.
about your home.
It's a balancing act, and if we
Yeah.
let Jesus take care of that balance and look to Him,
Yep.
it really works out.
It all comes back to Him, right?
It does.
That's it.
It truly does.
And so as we close, I just want to thank you guys for coming on and
thank you.
talking about serving. It's all about Him. That's where we're going. It's seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. It's like that's it. And so I hope that those listening, you guys, and watching, I hope that you have been encouraged by this. Don't be afraid to get out and be uncomfortable and serve every single day, no matter what you're doing, giving it to the Lord and being available. Thanks, guys, so much. Thank you again for listening and watching. We hope that you would continue to follow along with us and join us as we follow Jesus together. So thank you, and God bless.